welcome to another edition of Inside Government. I'm Cedric Peterson. My guest in studio is the director of the Bureau for Intellectual Property, Mrs. Vincentia Rosen-Sandiford. Mrs. Rosen-Sandiford, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Inside Government.
Oh, thank you for having me, Cedric.
So I understand that there's going to be a 2-day seminar.
Intellectual property professionals
seminar. And that's going to be held on March 8th and the 9th.
Correct.
Where is it going to be held?
At the Bel Air Community Center.
And what is the reason for this seminar?
Well, I think we have to go behind the reason why we decided to have this seminar now. Because initially, we were planning to have seminars later, workshops, seminars later in the year, around the third and the fourth quarter. However, we noticed that it was necessary to do it sooner than later, especially after being struck by the hurricanes Irma and Maria. I say if it didn't affect you, then something is seriously wrong. So it did affect us. It did affect the Bureau and also our goals and objectives and for what it is we want to do and achieve for 2018. It's always been a goal of ours to create more awareness in the public as far as intellectual property rights. Mm-hmm. Why is it necessary and how do you obtain it? And one of the ways to do so, or part of our plan and goal for this year, is to work together with relevant stakeholders that play an essential role in creating more awareness. And one of them are our intellectual property professionals, such as the trademark representatives and the staff who are employed by the trademark representatives, in a sense, the trademark administrators.
Okay.
So we want to play our role in rebuilding Sint Maarten. And how are we going to do that? By organizing more of these events ourselves, or to continue to take part in workshops that are already organized for entrepreneurs. So if there's something that has been organized that's specifically giving information to entrepreneurs, whether it is writing a business plan or creating a balance sheet,
right,
and you would like the Bureau to be a guest and speak on the aspect of intellectual property rights, then we're also open and we welcome that as well.
Interesting. Vincentia, looking at your 2-day program structure, how does it break down?
Well, in the beginning, we want to familiarize people with the Bureau. So we give a little bit of a history of the Bureau, how the Bureau came into existence.
Okay.
And then we're going to focus, besides on the history of the Bureau, we're going to focus also on the working relationship that the Bureau has with our partner, which is situated in the Netherlands, the Benelux Office for Intellectual Property. The task and responsibilities of the Bureau, because that's also a question that we get a lot in the public, like, what type of government body are you? Are you a government body? What are your responsibilities? And I think most importantly, what the public would like to know is, what are the services provided by the Bureau? So all of that will be touched based on in the morning program, because we have 2 full days, pretty intense program. And then we'll focus on what is intellectual property. So just the basics of what is intellectual property, the differences. I'll not get into what are the differences as yet. And then we'll go on trademark basics. So that's day 1, the morning. Then in the afternoon, we'll have a brief recap of the morning program. So for those that were not able to attend the morning program, they're only able to attend the afternoon program. At least they'll get a recap of, well, what did we cover in the morning? And they'll be able to ask questions. And then we'll go into more depth on trademarks. So the responsibilities of a trademark holder, of a trademark representative, cases of infringement, litigation. There'll be some case law, so that will be very interesting. We have 2 facilitators for the workshop. So one will be covering the basics. That's going to be Mr. Camille Janssen from the Benelux Office for Intellectual Property. And he's a lawyer. And in the afternoon, he's a lawyer at the Benelux Office for Intellectual Property. And in the afternoon, we'll have a lawyer who's situated in Curaçao, Miss Karine Jans. She is an intellectual property lawyer. She has experience in intellectual property rights for over 20 years. So does Mr. Jansen. They both have experience of over 20 years. And that's basically the morning and afternoon program of day 1. And day 2, a repeat of the morning program. However, then we're going to be focusing on copyright and patents. And then in the afternoon, we'll do a brief recap of both morning programs for those that weren't able to take part, so that they just get trademark, copyrights, patents, because those are the main ones for Sint Maarten that are most relevant for Sint Maarten. And then we'll focus again on case law, infringement, litigation. So pretty full.
Pretty full 2 days ahead of you. Okay. All right. Well, now I'm going to take our listeners who are just connecting, who might find this very, very interesting, and we're going to break this down now into some fundamental questions. Tell us a little bit about the Bureau for Intellectual Property.
Want a little bit of history?
A little bit of history, yeah. Take us back just a little bit. How was it founded?
So there was a Bureau for Intellectual Property of the Netherlands Antilles before 10-10-10.
Right.
And so all intellectual property rights of the Netherlands Antilles were administered in Curaçao. Prior to 10-10-10, we had no office on Sint Maarten, unlike other organizations that had a branch office, you could say, on Sint Maarten. The Bureau was one that didn't exist. So what happened between October 10th, 2010, up until October 1st, 2015, almost for 5 years, Curaçao acted on behalf of Sint Maarten and administered the trademark rights. However, as per law, not to get into too complicated details about the law, there had to be a bureau established within 5 years after 10-10-10. So we managed to do it just 9 days before the deadline. And on October 1st, 2015, the Bureau for Intellectual Property of Sint Maarten was born. And that means that as of that date, Sint Maarten wasn't responsible for administering their trademark rights on their own. First of all, we register trademarks. That's our core. That's our core business, because, I see it as a business. In order to run the Bureau on a day-to-day basis, you have to, I think as director, have an entrepreneurial state of mind in order for it to function.
When disaster strikes, it affects all of us.
Yeah, girl. Tell Desan to come and see me. I'll put her name at the top of the list.
You need to know that as a citizen, your rights are always protected.
I just need help.
Here, fill those out.
I have filled out this form 3 times already. I need help. This is just a waste of time.
If you feel your rights have been violated or have a legitimate complaint against any government body, even in these troubling times, we are here to listen to and act upon your concerns. The Ombudsman will use all of its resources to seek a fair resolution, keeping the government fully accountable. The Ombudsman, protecting your rights. Brought to you by the International Ombudsman Institute.
What exactly does the Bureau for Intellectual Property do?
First of all, we register trademarks.
Okay.
That's our core. That's our core business, because, I see it as a business. In order to run the Bureau on a day-to-day basis, you have to, I think as director, have an entrepreneurial state of mind in order for it to function.
Of course.
We provide information regarding the registration of trademarks and patents. Patents are registered at the Patent Bureau in the Netherlands, so we work closely together with them as well.
Okay.
They're a department of the Economic Affairs in the Netherlands. We record on demand, first registered for protected basis, which is called the I-envelope. So we'll get into the details of an I
Right.
envelope. So in a nutshell, we're a center of knowledge about copyrights, trademarks, patent, and other IP rights.
Mhm.
You may be interested in other IP rights that are not necessarily regulated by law in St. Maarten, but we can provide information on that as well.
Okay.
We represent the St. Maarten government on an international level as far as intellectual property rights. We are part of the World Intellectual Property Organization, and we are part of the International Trademark Association as well, also known as INTA. And we also advise the Minister of Tiat and the government apparatus on issues regarding intellectual property rights.
Under the current structure of government, what ministry is responsible for the Bureau for Intellectual Property?
The Ministry of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Traffic, and Telecommunication. The minister has the political responsibility of the Bureau. The Bureau is an independent governing body, and it is supervised by a supervisory board. And currently we have 3 members in the supervisory board. Miss Melinda Hoover is the chairperson. Mrs. Glennis Vlon, she's the vice chair. And Mr. Ahmed Bell, he's a board member.
What is the difference between copyright and patent?
Big difference.
Huge difference.
Huge difference.
Okay. What are the differences?
Cedric knows the answer, but for the public.
For the public.
Okay, so copyright is created automatically by law. I always start off by saying this. I'm a broken record. You've heard me say this before.
Uh-huh.
It's the easiest law, but yet the hardest one to explain.
Really?
It is, because in order to obtain copyright, you don't have to register. There's no registration process. There are other countries that they have the ability for you to register. However, it's not compulsory. What does that mean? It's obtained automatically by law. For example, copyright is first to publish. So once you write a song and you perform it on a stage, then you're the first one that has performed that song with that, I'm not that musical, but with that beat or with those lyrics, etc.,
Right.
then you're first to publish. Same thing with writing an article or a book. It's first to publish. With books, it's a little bit easier because you have an ISBN, International Standard Book Number. So you can say, hey, that ISBN is linked to that author. However, it gets more complicated with paintings, photographs, music, etc.
That's interesting. What exactly makes it complicated?
Burden of proof.
Wow. Okay.
The burden of proof. And you would see that also in other laws, burden of proof is something that reoccurs in many laws. Initially, it was derived from intellectual property laws and from copyright. Copyright law is one of the longer existing laws. And basically, the burden of proof lies with the creator. If you are, how do you know if something is an original Van Gogh? Well, people would put their name or initials on a painting and the date. And how do you know if something is authentic or not? So it's basically burden of proof. But
Okay.
but with what we can do as a solution, there are a few countries that do this. They have an I-envelope, or some even have a digital version of it called the iDepot. And let's say you have an idea or creation, you haven't fully worked out your idea, your song, your book. You can record it in an I-envelope. An I-envelope is a 2-fold envelope. And you place the information, the same information in both envelopes. It's sealed by the Bureau. It's given a date and time stamp. We at the Bureau do not know the contents of your I-envelope. That's how secret it is. In the event that someone challenges your intellectual property right, your copyright, then against a small fee, you can ask for that second copy, and you can take the person to court. And then at that moment, the seal will be broken. The I-envelope will no longer be valid, but you can use it as proof.
A process that I learned back in school, known as the poor man's copyright. Now, interesting to see that it actually has evolved to the I-envelope.
The poor man's copyright is a little bit different. With the poor man's copyright, how are you sure that there's no case of infringement? I think the poor man's copyright nowadays is, well, let me email something to myself.
Right.
However, I think we know that there are some clever hackers out there and they can change dates, etc. You can't change the date on the I-envelope. It's by the official Bureau for Intellectual Property. So as far as what would be more trustworthy in a court, I imagine that the I-envelope will hold more ground.
Okay. So what is a patent?
What is a patent?
Right.
A patent is a solution to a technical problem. That's how I can summarize it. So, for example, once upon a time, we had office chairs, and they were very hard, and they caused a lot of back problems. And then they came up with the ergonomic office chair.
Right.
So that's a solution to a technical problem. It doesn't necessarily have to be a piece of furniture. It could also be medication, a solution to a problem. Once upon a time, they created morphine to deal with pain management, and a patent was requested for that. Even aspirin, that was once patented as well. There are patents on, what's a crazy thing that there was a patent on? Legos. Once long time ago.
Okay.
Of course, patents in the Dutch, in the kingdom law, are only for a duration of 20 years. So, of course, some of the examples that I'm naming, they're no longer protected by a patent, and you see a lot of duplications of it. So, with the Lego, for example, you see something called Duplo, and there's so many different versions
of Lego.
Yeah,
Wow.
because it's no longer protected by a patent.
What is the difference between copyright and trademarks?
Trademark can be either a word mark, or it can be a figurative mark meaning a logo. So you can have the word mark, the famous example, Coca-Cola. It's one of the top brands in the world. And then you also can have the logo for Coca-Cola. So you could just have the words Coca-Cola, that would be considered a word mark. And then the figurative mark is then the logo and how it's written, and has a special font type and a special color. And so you can also protect the color, that as well.
So that'd be your trademark aspect of it.
That's your trademark. And that's what you can protect under trademark law. But how do you protect that? You're protecting it for a number of products and services. And in St. Maarten, what's applicable for us is something called the NIS classification.
Okay.
And it's about 45 classes that you can choose from. However, usually trademark holders choose a minimum of 2 to 3 classes. But in some cases, you could have a trademark holder requesting protection for up to 10 classes.
Okay. How does one know if a trademark is still available?
You can do a search in our online register.
Okay. And where does one go in order to do that?
www.bip.essex.
Does the Bureau publish a monthly trademark overview?
No, we do not, because we're one of the first in the Caribbean to have an online register after the BES Islands. And it's very interesting because the Benelux Office for Intellectual Property, they created an online register for the BES after 10-10-10. And we thought, hey, this is working great. When I say we, I mean St. Maarten, country St. Maarten. We need one of these. So, and that's kind of how it rolled into St. Maarten getting their online register and working together with the Benelux office for intellectual property because they were doing such a great job with the BES.
How do you know which trademark has been published within that period of time? For example, a month.
There's an advanced search option as well. So you can search for a certain period of time. So there's a basic search that you can search on a word mark, or you can search on a particular number if you know what number a trademark is registered under, or you can do an advanced search and then you can find a certain period of time that trademarks were registered.
Do I have to register my trademark at BIP Sint Maarten if I've already registered one in another country?
If you want protection in St. Maarten, yes.
Simple as that.
Simple as that.
What is the difference between the registration of the trade name at the Chamber of Commerce and the registration, for example, at the Bureau of Intellectual Property in regards to the scope of protection?
The difference of a trademark and a trade name. Trademark law is more extensive than for a trade name. Trade name, if somebody infringes on your trade name, then you would have to take them to court if that's your desire, to make a claim based on the unlawful act. Proceedings will be a lot longer, and then the burden of proof a lot greater. However, with trademark law, that simplifies it. Of course, you have to always look at registering your trademark or any intellectual property right as from the perspective of cost-benefit analysis, because how expensive is it to register your trademark? Taking a step back of like, why do you register your trademark? There are different reasons why you can register your trademark. One, because you want to scare people off and say, hey, that's my trademark, don't register that. Or it could be for even more, having the right to enforce. And in order to have the right to enforce, you have to register. So register is step one, enforce is step two. But the question you have to ask yourself is it a benefit for my business? Do I need to protect my profits to that extent by enforcing? You know, how many legal fees am I going to have, etc. And I would say enforce is actually step three, because before that you have monitor. So register, monitor, enforce. You have to monitor in order to be able to enforce. So it's a process, but when using, and that's something that our speaker, Karine Jans, in the afternoon will address during the seminar. Why? Why do you register your trademark? And what are the benefits? What are the economic benefits? But even for a small entrepreneur, it can be a benefit, because you may be small today, but big picture thinking, 5-10 years from now, you may be able to use your trademark and license it to even smaller businesses for use, or use it in the sense, license it that it becomes, a franchise. So there's a lot of different options.
How do I go about registering my copyright in Sint Maarten? If one is listening to this conversation, they might get overwhelmed. Do I come to see you? Do I go to a website? How does it work?
We always advise people to go to our website, because if they go to our website, again, www.bip.sx, and also visit our Facebook page, Bureau for Intellectual Property St. Maarten. Every week, we post 2 new frequently asked questions, and we address topics such as, what is a trademark? What is a trademark representative? What is copyright? What is an envelope? I-envelope? How can I-envelope help me to protect my copyright? These are the different questions that we answer on a weekly basis, and we see the response for that is growing as well. So I would say go to those mediums, because then you're better informed that by the time that you enter our office for an appointment, you won't ask a question such as, which is better for you, because it saves time for you. You're an entrepreneur, you're busy, you don't have a lot of time. So, taking an hour out of your day is a lot. Whereas, there's so much information on the internet about the Bureau and what the Bureau does, that you can come in and in 20 minutes get your answer. Instead of coming in and say, how can I patent my copyright? A patent, we already learned, is different,
than a copyright.
Than a copyright. So
People would have a company, or perhaps you would have a slogan, and you would see TM or R. What do those two signs mean?
good questions. On St. Maarten, it's not necessary. I'll start off by saying that. It's a practice that's more exercised in the US and with US brands, US trademarks. The TM usually means they've filed for a trademark. The R usually means that they've registered a trademark. And the C usually means that they've registered their copyright. Again, some countries you can register your copyright. There's a copyright registry, a separate department for that. St. Maarten doesn't have that because our law is not set up in that way. Copyright law is, or copyright is obtained automatically by law, so therefore no registration is needed. There are many countries, including the US, that are part of the Berne Convention. And the Berne Convention, that's a treaty, states that registration cannot be forced for copyright. You can make it available. However, that does not give you the copyright. The copyright is first to publish, for example.
Vincentia, that's all the time that we have in this edition of Inside Government. We want to thank you for, of course, giving us some basic insight into copyright, trademarks, patents. And there's so much more that we want to discuss, but we'll save it for another edition of our program. Where can one go in order to get more information?
Well, they can go to our website. Our address is listed there. We recently moved to Professional Office Park, Osprey Drive number 4. That's next to where Sangs used to be, where Fairway Market is right now. And we're at the second building in the back. We have parking, so please come in, visit us, ask for information, get an appointment with one of our staff members, and we'll be happy to help you.
Vincentia, thank you very much for joining us for this edition of Inside Government.
Thank you for having me.
And to our radio listeners and television viewers, thank you for being a part of our broadcast. If you've missed this edition of Inside Government, we invite you to log on to the official government website, stmartengov.org, for video on demand. On behalf of the team here at the Department of Communication, I'm Cedric Peterson. Thanks for tuning in.